Okay, let's go into Mike Lindell's deep dive. So Mike Lindell, known to many as the My Pillow guy, right, has transformed from a beloved infomercial entrepreneur into one of Minnesota's most controversial political figures. And now he's launched a campaign for governor of Minnesota in 2026 as a Republican, hoping to unseat, Democratic Tim Walz, who is reportedly not running anymore. And this deep dive will explore Lindell's personal background, business career, political involvements, accomplishments, and controversies, so everything's on the table. We'll also compare him with the other candidates in the 2026 governor's race, both Republicans and lean Democrats like Senator Amy Klobuchar, and assess his chances in the election. Our goal is to present a comprehensive, unbiased profile in an accessible way so that any Minnesotan can understand who Mike Lindell is and what his candidacy means. And we'll also cover how to vote in Minnesota and encourage you to double-check everything yourself. So let's get into the personal background. So Mike Lindell was born in 1961 in Mankato, Minnesota, and grew up in the towns of Chaska and Carver. His early life was marked by struggles. As a teenager, he developed a gambling addiction, and in his 20s, he became addicted to cocaine, later spiraling into crack cocaine used in the 1990s. His addictions led to serious hardships, including the foreclosure of his house and the collapse of his marriage. In 2009, however, Lindell says he finally achieved sobriety through prayer and turned his life around. This personal redemption story of going from crack addict to CEO would later become central to his public image. He even recounted it as a 2019 memoir titled, "What Are the Odds? From Crack Addict to CEO." After various small business ventures in the 1980s, ranging from carpet cleaning to, owning bars, Lindell's big break came in 2004 when he invented the product that made him famous, the My Pillow. He created a pillow filled with interlocking pieces of foam and began selling it locally. From these humble beginnings, Lindell managed to grow My Pillow into a nationally recognized brand, thanks in large part to relentless infomercials and TV commercials featuring Lindell himself as the enthusiastic, cross-wearing spokesman. By 2013, My Pillow had exploded from a small startup into a company with roughly 600 employees and $102 million in revenue, up from just 60 employees and $3 million in a few years prior. Lindell became a familiar face, smiling with his trademark mustache and clutching his foam pillows in his ads, an image of a jovial Minnesota entrepreneur living the American dream, right? Mike Lindell in 2013 at a My Pillow manufacturing facility in Shakopee, Minnesota, is where one of his main facilities he visited was. He grew My Pillow from a startup, though, to a business with hundreds of employees and over $100 million in sales. My Pillow's success was a point of pride for Lindell and many Minnesotans alike. The company manufactures pillows, bedding, and other sleep products in Minnesota, and Lindell has often highlighted, the jobs he created. He has stated that employing people, especially those who, like him, had challenges in their lives, is important to him, even resisting automation to save jobs. Under Lindell's leadership, My Pillow built an almost cult-like customer following, aided by the founder's personal story of redemption and on-screen charisma. However, Lindell's business career has not been free of controversy or setbacks. In 2017, the BBB revoked My Pillow's accreditation and gave it an F rating after finding that the company's constant buy one get one free promotions were essentially a continuous sale that never ended, misleading consumers about the actual price of the pillows. Lindell expressed disappointment at the BBB's decision, but it was an early hint that My Pillow's marketing tactics were under scrutiny. There were also legal actions over advertising claims. For instance, My Pillow faced complaints for claiming its products could treat medical conditions, claims which were not backed by evidence, by the way. Lindell weathered these storms and kept expanding his product line and advertising heavily. Starting in 2020, as Lindell became more involved in politics, which we'll detail shortly, My Pillow began to face backlash. Major retailers like Kohl's, Bed Bath & Beyond, Walmart, and others stopped carrying My Pillow products in 2021. Lindell asserted they canceled his products due to his political stance in the 2020 election, while the retailer said the decisions were due to declining sales and customer demand. The loss of retail partnerships hurt My Pillow's bottom line. By mid-2023, the company was reportedly struggling. My Pillow auctioned off some manufacturing equipment and subleased warehouse space after additional retailers dropped the brand. Lindell admitted to financial pressures. Even American Express cut his credit line, but he insisted that My Pillow would survive through direct sales to consumers. As of late 2023, Lindell said My Pillow has still around 1,300 employees, but they have not received profit-sharing bonuses in 3 years due to the company's constant losses. Now, on the positive side, Lindell used his business success as a platform for philanthropy. Sorry, I have a tongue tie, so I might mispronounce some words. and personal causes. He founded the Lindell Foundation, a nonprofit that initially focused on helping people struggling with addiction like himself and later broadened to support cancer victims and veterans. He also launched a Lindell Recovery Network, aiming to help others find freedom from addiction. These charitable endeavors are an important part of how Lindell portrays himself, as someone who hit rock bottom and now feels called to give others a hand up. His Christian faith plays a big role in this narrative too. Lindell is very open about being a born-again Christian, often crediting God for his recovery and business success. This mix of entrepreneurial achievement and faith-based charity work earned him a level of respect in some circles, even as his later political forays would prove polarizing. And next we're going to get into political activism and ideological positions. Lindell's political involvement began in earnest later in his life, but once he got involved, he went all in. He has been a Republican for years, but it was Donald Trump's rise that truly galvanized Lindell. By 2016, Lindell was an avid Trump supporter. He attended the then candidates' rallies and even visited Trump Tower after the election. He became one of Trump's most prominent allies, using his MyPillow fame to champion Trump's agenda. In Lindell's own words, he became a Trump acolyte, this is in his own words, Lindell's, around 2018, and even considered running for office in Minnesota around that time. He flirted with the 2022 governor run, but ultimately didn't enter that race. Now, during Trump's presidency, Lindell visited the White House on multiple occasions. He served as a Minnesota campaign chair for Trump and appeared at official events. He grew close to the Trump family and was seen as an informal advisor. In fact, Lindell's personal cell phone number famously appeared on notes he carried into a White House meeting in January 2021, and a press photographer's zoom lens caught his notes mentioned the words martial law and other drastic measures. Those partially visible notes suggested Lindell was urging Trump to consider extreme options to stay in power after losing the 2020 election. This incident foreshadowed just how far Lindell was willing to go in his political activism. The 2020 presidential election became a defining moment for Lindell. Okay? So when Joe Biden won and Donald Trump falsely alleged widespread fraud, Lindell emerged as one of the loudest voices echoing and financing those conspiracy theories. He poured millions of dollars into what he calls an election crime crusade, funding lawsuits, commissioning amateur analysis of voting data, and producing documentaries with titles like Absolute Proof that claimed to reveal election fraud. He even organized a high-profile cyber, I forgot what the word was, in 2021. Basically, it invites experts in the media to examine supposed data that would prove voting machines were hacked. By the way, no credible evidence emerged from that event whatsoever. A security expert who showed Lindell's data was baseless actually won a $5 million prize that Lindell had offered for disproving his claims, though Lindell fought the payout. Should note that. Lindell's ideological position can be described as far-right populist with a strong religious undercurrent. He is pro-Trump and has embraced or promoted several conspiracy theories associated with the MAGA movement. Most notably, he has relentlessly pushed the false claim that electronic voting machines from companies like Dominion and Smartmatic were rigged against Trump in 2020, a claim reportedly debunked by election officials, security experts, and courts. Lindell's focus on election integrity boils down to a demand for eliminating voting machines entirely in favor of hand-counted paper ballots. Election experts have noted that hand counts are actually less accurate and more prone to human error and delay, undermining the very trust in elections Lindell claims to defend. Beyond elections, Lindell espouses other hardline conservative views. His 2026 campaign platform, for example, calls for sending illegal immigrants back and cracking down on unlawful immigration. He also wants to fix a failing school system, echoing a common conservative critique of public education, and to stop exploding property taxes. Lindell frames many issues in terms of moral or existential crisis. He often invokes religion, painting political opponents or institutions as driven by evil forces. At MyPillow headquarters, he keeps Bibles and devotional literature in the lobby and surrounds himself with symbols of his faith. On Steve Bannon's podcast, Lindell and Bannon cast their fight in almost biblical terms. They're trying to bankrupt Mike Lindell. When they go after Lindell, they're going after you, Bannon said, to which Lindell offers sales on pillows as a way for people to support his cause. This mix of Christian nationalism, anti-establishment rhetoric, and conspiracy-laden worldview defines Lindell's ideology here. It's important to note that Lindell's claims have been widely discredited by neutral sources. For instance, after the 2020 election, a coalition of federal cybersecurity and election officials declared it the most secure in American history with no evidence of the massive fraud Lindell alleges. Multiple audits and recounts in battleground states upheld those results. Lindell, however, was not relented. He insists that even Republican election officials and judges are blocking the truth, going so far as to accuse some Republicans of stealing elections as well. His rationale, he believes both major parties might be complicit in protecting electronic voting systems. These views place him on the fringe of the Republican Party ideologically. Even many Trump supporters accept the 2020 outcome at this point, but Lindell will not stop. Another aspect of Lindell's political persona is his promotion of unproven medical cures and other conspiracy-adjacent ideas. During the COVID-19 pandemic, he famously touted a herbal extract called, I think it's Olerian, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, as a miracle cure for COVID, despite no scientific evidence in the fact that it's a toxic plant to begin with. He even tried to get the Trump administration to approve it. Okay, scientists warned it was dangerous. In an ironic twist, though, Lindell later blamed the IRS for not letting him write off a $10 million shipment of it that expired when regulators blocked its distribution. And this episode also highlighted Lindell's distrust of experts and institutions, a theme consistent with his election activism. From vaccines to voting machines, Lindell often takes a stance to the mainstream consensus, aligning instead with fringe theories that circulate in certain corners of the internet or on far-right outlets. Politically, Lindell has never held public office, but he has attempted to influence the Republican Party from within it. In January 2023, he ran for chairman of the Republican National Committee, the RNC, challenging incumbent, I believe it was Ronna McDaniel. It was a long shot bid for him, essentially a protest candidacy by the party's ultra-mega base. Not surprisingly, Lindell lost badly, securing only 4 votes out of 168 RNC members. McDaniel was reelected with 111 votes. This result showed that while Lindell is a hero to some grassroots activists, he had minimal support among the party establishment insiders. Lindell brushed off the loss, but it underscored a key point. Within the GOP, he remains a polarizing figure, admired by the pro-Trump base, but viewed warily by many traditional Republicans. By late 2025, with Trump running again for president in 2024, and Lindell running for governor in 2026, Lindell secured Donald Trump's endorsement for his bid for Minnesota. Trump's public support could bolster Lindell in the GOP primary, given Trump's influence on Republican-based voters. However, it could be a double-edged sword in a general election, honestly. Minnesota has learned and leaned as well. The Democrats are the ones most likely to be voted, because remember, Trump lost Minnesota in both 2016 and 2020. And tying oneself so closely to Trump may alienate moderates. Democrats certainly seem eager to tie Lindell to Trump. When Lindell announced his run, Governor Tim Walz responded, "We've seen what happens when we elect a con man to the highest office in America, and we cannot let it happen here in Minnesota." The phrase con man was a not-so-subtle comparison of Lindell to Trump, signaling that Democrats will campaign against Lindell by highlighting the most extreme aspects of his ideology, and perhaps his checkered business claims. In summary, Lindell's political profile is that of an outsider agitator, someone who believes, or at least claims to believe, in grand conspiracies, frames issues in apocalyptic moral terms, and prioritizes loyalty to Donald Trump and evangelical Christian values. This has won him a devoted following in some conservative circles here in Minnesota, but has also made him a lightning rod for criticism and a target of numerous fact checks and legal challenges, which we will explore next. Lindell's image over time. Despite the controversies, it's important to acknowledge Mike Lindell's accomplishments and how his public image has evolved over time. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, Lindell was largely seen as a Minnesota success story. This was a man who overcame a severe drug addiction, found God, and built a prosperous, homegrown business that employed hundreds of people. He donated to addiction rehab programs, set up his foundation, and gave second chances to employees who were down on their luck. Sorry, I have my dog with me today. Lindell's personable, enthusiastic demeanor on TV, clutching a pillow and promising viewers the best sleep of their lives made him something of a pulp culture figure. He even appeared in commercials during the 2017 Super Bowl pregame show, further cementing his brand. During this period, Lindell's public image was largely positive. A rags-to-riches businessman with a heart known more for pillows than politics. Then around 2016-2017, Lindell's profile started to shift as he became more publicly political, but initially he still drew praise. He interacted with both parties at first. For instance, he attended one of Democrat Amy Klobuchar's State of the Union addresses as her guest, in recognition of his entrepreneurship in Minnesota. Klobuchar later said Lindell was a very polite guest, though they clearly diverged politically afterwards. This era was short-lived. As Lindell became an outspoken Trump supporter, he increasingly alienated Democrats and even some moderate Republicans here in Minnesota. Still, some elements of his old image persisted. His redemption story and charitable work continued to resonate with many people, especially those in faith communities or those who have family members struggling with addiction. By 2020 and beyond, Lindell's image took a sharp turn. He became one of the nation's most prominent purveyors of election misinformation, earning him frequent spots on news segments, often not in a flattering light. National late-night comedians and pundits began to lampoon Lindell as the pillow salesman who lost his mind over conspiracy theories. Social media has flooded with memes about him. At the same time, in pro-Trump circles, Lindell's willingness to risk his fortune and reputation made him something of a folk hero to them. He has spent an estimated tens of millions of dollars on his self-styled election crusade, and as Steve Bannon noted, he risked his company in the process. To sympathetic conservatives, this looks like courage and patriotism, Lindell fighting for what he and they believe is truth regardless of the cost. To critics, it looks like a dangerous, fantasism, a millionaire amplifying lies that undermine democracy. Thus, Lindell's public image polarizes heavily among and along partisan lines. Now, how credible are the various criticisms of Lindell's? We can evaluate a few of the biggest ones. Let's go with the conspiracy theorist label first. This is supported by Lindell's own statements and multiple fact checks. Reputable sources, including from the AP to federal judges, have confirmed that Lindell's claims of a stolen 2020 election are baseless. Courts have repeatedly rejected allegations of widespread fraud in dozens of lawsuits. The proof Lindell often touts has not held up under scrutiny. Indeed, it has landed him in legal trouble. So calling him a conspiracy theorist is not just name-calling, it reflects the consensus of experts around the content of his claims. Lindell, of course, disputes this and says everyone is part of a cover-up, but the evidence, is unfortunately for him, overwhelming against him on this point. Now, the legal issues and integrity. Lindell's opponents often imply he's dishonest or shady, sometimes even using Walt's term con man. It's true that Lindell has faced legal consequences for his claims. In 2023 and 2025, he was found liable for defamation in multiple cases. In one, a federal judge ruled that Lindell defamed Smartmatic, a voting technology company, by accusing them of rigging the election. In another, a jury in Colorado found that he defamed a Dominion Voting Systems employee, Eric Comer, by falsely calling the man a traitor and implicating him in an imaginary fraud scheme of his. The jury ordered Lindell to pay $2.3 million in damages in that case. These outcomes lend strong credibility to the criticism that Lindell spread false accusations with reckless disregard for the truth. It's not just political mudslinging here in the eyes of the law. Lindell lied about these people and companies causing harm. Lindell's defense has been that he truly believes what he says, portraying the lawsuits as attempts to silence him, but thus far has not spared him from that accountability. He is currently appealing some verdicts, but it's still an uphill battle for him. Next, we're going to get into business practices. There have been accusations that Lindell mistreats employees and or runs his business irresponsibly. I did not find any evidence of any widespread labor violations or employee lawsuits against him. In fact, former colleagues and MyPillow employees give a mixed picture, similar to Amy Klobuchar's. Lindell is undeniably a demanding boss. He admits to being extremely hands-on and particular about details, sometimes abrupt and demanding without saying please or thank you. Employees who have worked with him for years say he can be tough, but they also say he is generous and caring to loyal staff. One long-time vice president at MyPillow knows that Lindell supports employees who want to grow in the company and shows personal kindness in times of need. For example, sending flowers and cards when an employee's family member dies. Lindell himself likes to say, I treat every employee like my only employee, meaning he is intensely involved with each person. This can read as supportive or as micromanaging, depending on perspective. There have been no major verified allegations of abuse or illegal treatment of workers that we could find in reputable sources. The worst that credible reports suggest is that Lindell's management style is chaotic, high pressure, and befitting a fanatic entrepreneur. In short, the staff treatment allegations seem to be more anecdotal than systemic. Some former insiders praise his loyalty, others note his temper, but there's no indication of something like widespread labor or abuse that has been used to, smear him. Next, we're going to get to his ideological extremism. Critics say Lindell is an extremist or out of touch with reality, citing not only the election stuff, but also things with the COVID cure episode, right? Here, the credibility of criticism is strong again. Lindell did promote a potentially dangerous, unproven drug for COVID. He continues to push theories that even conservative networks like Fox News, right, have largely distanced themselves. And from Fox 9 is Minnesota's Fox channel, and Newsmax stopped giving him airtime, by the way, to avoid legal liability for his claims. But when your statements are so outrageous that even right-leaning media step back, it suggests that criticisms of extremism have merit. That said, Lindell supporters would argue that he is a visionary or truth teller willing to say things others won't. But from a fact-based standpoint, many of his high-profile assertions, like China hacked the voting machines or this plant cures COVID, have been thoroughly debunked. Thus, calling him extreme is supported by the evidence of his public positions relative to the mainstream. So as Lindell's public image shifted, so did his relationships and business ties. As mentioned, many retailers and even banks severed ties with him post-2020. In 2022, the FBI seized Lindell's cell phone while he was at a Hardee's drive-thru in Mankato as part of the DOJ investigation into efforts to overturn the election and possible breaches of voting equipment. Agents questioned him about a Republican county clerk in Colorado accused of tampering voting machines and about data on his Frank Speech website. Lindell was not charged with a crime as of this writing, but the incident showed that his activities drew serious federal scrutiny. The image of Lindell ranting on his live stream about the FBI surrounding him in a fast food restaurant became yet another defining moment for him. To some, proof that he was being prosecuted for his beliefs. To others, confirmation that he had entangled himself in dubious possible illegal schemes. Summing up his evolution, Mike Lindell started as a feel-good Minnesota entrepreneur with bipartisan appeal, and over the past decade, he has rebranded, intentionally rebranded or not, into a partisan firebrand. His core personal narrative, overcoming addiction, finding faith, still inspires many, but it's now often overshadowed by his reputation as a conspiracy theorist and provocateur. As he runs for governor in 2026, voters will have to weigh both sides of the coin now. The passionate, successful businessman and philanthropist versus the divisive, controversy-laden activist he is now. It's a remarkably stark contrast embodied in one man. Lindell versus the Republican field in 2026 is what we're going to get into next. So Mike Lindell is not the only Republican who wants to be the next governor of Minnesota. In fact, the 2026 GOP field is quite crowded this year. Lindell enters a race that includes at least a dozen Republicans hopeful, ranging from elected officials to fellow outsiders. Some of the notable Republican candidates as of early 2026 are Lisa DeMuth, the current Speaker of the Minnesota House of Reps. And her video will be the one I'll be doing next. Then we have Dr. Scott Jensen, a physician and former state senator who was the GOP nominee for governor in 2022. And then we have Kendall Qualls, a businessman and Army veteran who previously ran for Congress in 2020 and for governor in 2022, who did not win the primary in 2022. And then there's Kristen Robbins, who I'm not a personal fan on, and that one I will take my time on doing the deep dive in that video because I will be very biased if I don't. Otherwise, you have Chris Medell, as well, a defense attorney and political newcomer. There are also several other candidates, including former officials and activists, given that the GOP field has around a dozen names total, but those are the major ones I'll be breaking down for you guys. But how does Lindell stack up against these Republican rivals? In terms of name recognition, Lindell arguably tops them all, but it's a double-edged sword. He's famous, but also infamous. That contrasts with someone like Lisa DeMuth, who may not be well known outside her district, or Kendall Qualls, who is still introducing himself to many voters. Lindell's celebrity status for MyPillow ads and frequent TV appearances ensures that GOP primary voters will at least know who he is when they see his name on the ballot. Lindell's candidacy is also boosted by his close alliance with Donald Trump, okay? Trump's endorsement of Lindell is likely to carry weight among the party base. In Minnesota's GOP, as in many states, the activist base has, trended very pro-Trump. If Trump actively campaigns for Lindell or signals strongly that Lindell is his guy, that could help Lindell consolidate the MAGA-leaning voters in the primary. Scott and Jensen and others have also courted Trump voters. Jensen, for instance, got Trump's endorsement in 2022 and echoed some election concerns. But Lindell might outflank them by being more vocal and aligned with Trump's wing. However, party insiders and strategists have serious reservations about Lindell. Some longtime Minnesota Republicans fear that if Lindell wins the primary, he would be too extreme to win a general election. Amy Koch, former GOP state Senate leader, said in an interview that Lindell's campaign, seems more about grabbing headlines than building a winning coalition, quipping, "I don't know anyone saying, you know who we need? Mike Lindell." This skepticism was reflected in a December 2025 Minnesota GOP straw poll of party delegates. Kendall Qualls nearly won that poll with 93 votes. Lisa DeMuth was close behind with 90, and Lindell came in third with 49 votes. While straw polls are informal and not binding in any way, shape, or form, they indicate early momentum. Lindell's third-place finish suggests that he has a base of support that is not the front runner among party activists statewide. He only entered the race late in 2025, so he was the newest entrant and perhaps hadn't organized supporters for the straw poll. Still, Qualls and DeMuth outperforming him there implies Lindell may not be every Republican's first choice. One factor, though, in Lindell's favor is his ability to self-fund or raise money from a national audience. Thanks to his prominence, he can likely pull in donations from Trump supporters nationally who don't usually care about Minnesota's governor, but know Lindell as an icon. This could give him a financial edge in the primary, whereas candidates like DeMuth or Jensen might rely on more traditional fundraising within the state. Lindell also has his personal wealth, though as noted, his finances have taken a hit. He's still presumably better off than many candidates when it comes to lending his campaign money or using his own businesses to promote his run. Another advantage Lindell might claim is the outsider appeal. Republican voters, especially post-Trump, often like insurgent non-establishment figures. Lindell never held any office, so he can kind of play that outsider card effectively. He's not a politician, and he can brag that he's a businessman who isn't beholden to the swamp of St. Paul. This message could resonate in a primary if voters are in an anti-establishment mood. Minnesota GOP voters did pick an outside doctor, Jensen, over more established figures in 2022's primary after all. However, being an outsider could also hurt Lindell in winning over delegates at the party endorsement convention. Minnesota Republicans traditionally endorse a candidate at a convention before the primary. Party activists at conventions will sometimes favor loyal Republicans who have served the party or hold office, like DeMuth or Robbins, over wild-card outsiders like Lindell. In 2022, for example, the party endorsed Jensen, but Jensen was a former state senator with some party bona fides, okay? It's unclear how delegates would receive Lindell. Some might love his passion, others might see him as a liability. There's also the prospect that Lindell could split the vote on the far right with someone like Jensen or Robbins, allowing a candidate like DeMuth, who might appeal to moderates, to squeak through or vice versa. With so many candidates, the primary could be won with a plurality. A messy and prolonged primary is a real concern for the GOP party. Republican insiders worry that if their field doesn't narrow down, though, the intra-party fight could drag on and weaken the eventual nominee. As Axios reported, they especially worry if the winner is a more conservative candidate who is seen as less viable in the general election. In other words, a candidate perceived as too extreme, a description that would fit Lindell in many insiders' eyes, emerging as a nominee is their nightmare scenario for the GOP because Minnesota is a state where moderates and independents decide statewide races. You heard that right. To put it bluntly, Lindell's challenge in the GOP primary is to convince enough Republican voters that he is electable and serious, not just a noisy sideshow. His ardent followers will vote for him regardless, but others might ask, can this My Pillow guy actually govern? Lindell has tried to address that by emphasizing his business leadership experience. When announcing his run, he said, "Those who know me know I'm up to the task. I've had my finger on the pulse of my business operations," implying that he can run a large organization and thus run the state. He's cast himself as a CEO who will bring business sense to government, and he claims root out fraud and waste as he accuses Waltz of allowing massive fraud in state programs at the same time. Still, his Republican opponents still likely hit him on his baggage, honestly. They are probably going to argue, for example, that the focus of the 2026 campaign should be on issues like crime, taxes, education, not relitigating 2020 or indulging in divisive conspiracy talk. Some may privately question his stability or point to a lawsuit and say he'd be tied up in court or bankrupt by the time November even comes. Lindell's tendency to go off on tangents about voting machines or to attack the media could wear thin in debates or public forums, honestly, potentially turning off undecided primary voters seeking a candidate who can stay on message about Minnesota's issues. In summary, within the Republican field, Lindell is simultaneously high profile and high risk. He has a passionate minority of supporters in the coveted Trump endorsement, but he's far from a consensus choice among Minnesota Republicans here. The primary will test whether the rank-and-file GOP voters want a brash Trump-aligned outsider, or if they're going to opt for a candidate with a more conventional profile who might have a better shot at winning the general election. Lindell's fate in the primary is thus one of the big question marks hanging over the Minnesota governor's race. Now let's look at Lindell's prospects against Democratic opponents, shall we? That there's currently none. There's currently none announced as of me making this video, and Walt stepped down. So, but I can maybe make an update video on all the Republicans that are running once we do know who Democrats. Our general attorney might actually run, I heard. But there's nothing to compare him to against Democrats right now. Honestly, I wish I would have got my act together a little bit last year and ran. But again, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm more independent lining. If y'all ever want to look at what my policies I have so far, if I ever do decide to run for anything in the state of Minnesota, I am on Run for Something. You can find me. It's Ashley Hayes. And all my policies I'd want to put in place are there. So that's kind of all I really have on Lindell today. There's so much more I could talk about on him, and I don't want to keep going because there's a lot, and I want you guys to do your own research on Lindell. He is not someone who aligns more conservative, okay? I don't think, this is my personal opinion, this is a little bit biased at this one, I don't think he's got it to win the primaries. I don't think he's going to make it. I don't think he'd win the election even if he made it past the primaries, just based on his track record so far and how traditional Republicans are in Minnesota. Honestly, Jesse Ventura had his ups and downs, but I probably would have honestly been on the fence about voting for him more on that side. If you know me, you know I'm not a fan of Tim Walz either. So it's just kind of one of those things. I just want to walk you guys through the good, the bad, the ugly, the messy in-betweens of every candidate, because you guys deserve this. We deserve that in Minnesota to vote with the correct information instead of watching the propaganda we see every year, day in and day out, we've been seeing for decades. And yes, I'm calling smear campaigns propaganda because that's what it is. Sue me if you want, but good luck. Because definition of propaganda, smear campaigns on political opponents, it's been here the entire time. But for him to win statewide Minnesota, a Republican would need to do two things. They need to run up big margins and rule in exurban areas and not lose the Twin Cities metro by too large a margin. And Lindell can certainly energize rural Republican-based voters. Many of them do like his, like I said, pro-Trump stance and might appreciate his outsider persona. But rural counties in Minnesota have trended even more Republican in recent cycles. For example, Trump won about 78 out of Minnesota's 87 counties in 2020, though he lost the state because the metro is heavily Democratic. And Lindell would likely also do well in those areas or even improve turnout among hardcore Trump supporters there. The problem for Lindell is the suburbs and the moderate voters. That's going to be his biggest hurdle. And I'm going to do a conclusion next because I just realized this is over a 10-minute part segment. Okay, let's get into voting in Minnesota, eligibility and resources. Elections ultimately come down to voters, right? And it's crucial that every eligible Minnesotan understands how to participate in their local elections. Minnesota consistently has one of the highest voter turnouts in the nation, thanks in part to robust voter-friendly laws. And here's what you need to know about voter eligibility and registration in Minnesota. Again, fact check everything I'm saying. Never take what I'm saying as truth. Please do your own research on candidates. But who can vote? To vote in Minnesota, you must be a U.S. citizen at least 18 years old on election day and a resident of Minnesota for at least 20 days before the election. You also must not be currently serving a prison sentence for a felony conviction. Once you are out of incarnation, you regain your right to vote in Minnesota. Minnesotans does not disenfranchise people on probation or parole. As long as you are not incarcerated for a felony, you can vote. Youth registration. Minnesota encourages young people to get involved. If you are 16 or 17 years old, you can pre-register to vote so that you are automatically registered when you turn 18. Many high schoolers take advantage of this so they're ready to go as soon as they come of age. You still cannot actually vote until you're 18, but pre-registering makes the process seamless for you. The registration process. You need to be registered at your current address. You can register online, by mail, or in person. Minnesota also allows same-day registration, meaning you can register at your polling place on election day with proper proof of residency. So even if you forget to register ahead of time, you won't miss your chance. To register on election day, bring your ID or a combination of documents that show your name and your current address. For example, a driver's license, learning permit, tribal ID, or a photo ID, plus a utility bill with your address. I normally use my driver's license if I need to do this, and my phone bill, for example. Election judges will help you through the process at your local polling site. Now, you can vote early and you can vote by mail. So Minnesota offers no excuse absentee voting, which means any voter can vote early by mail or in person before election day if they prefer. You can request an absentee ballot online or via your county election office and vote from home. Early in-person voting is typically available starting 46 days before the election at county offices and other designated locations. This is a great option to avoid lines or if you have schedule conflicts on election day. Voter resources. To check your registration status, find your polling place, or see a sample ballot, you can visit the Minnesota Secretary of State's website, MN Votes. This site has comprehensive information in multiple languages, English, Spanish, Hmong, Somali, etc. to help voters. You can also find information on how to register online, how to update your address, and what identification you may need to vote. Minnesota also has a voter hotline, usually listed on the Secretary of State's site, if you have questions or issues when voting. Also, please do your homework when it comes to candidates, whether it's Mike Lindell, Tim Wells, or any other candidate. It's so important to do your own research. Use me as your starting point and take my little snippets of my biased information with a grain of salt and throw it out the window during your research, please. Don't take my opinions for fact and what I'm giving you that are facts that are not biased. Take that as your starting point. Check out nonpartisan guides like those from League of Women's Voters or local newspapers' voter guides. Visit the candidates' official campaign websites. Look up debates and interviews. Watch those. Examine fact checks from reputable outlets on claims that sound too good to be true or too crazy to be true. The citations, that I've looked up on all these candidates in those little kind of numbers and brackets throughout like the text of articles, they point you also to sources for the information I've said here. And I'm always going to encourage you to click on those and read further when you see those during your research. Get engaged. If you're passionate about the election, consider getting involved. Attend a local candidate forum, volunteer for a campaign you believe in, or simply talk with friends and family about the stakes. Democracy is not a spectator sport, you guys. And Minnesota offers a lot of ways to participate beyond just voting. From caucuses and primaries to community discussions. Remember, election rules can sometimes change. So as 2026 approaches, double check the latest information from official sources. For instance, Minnesota recently updated its laws on voting rights for ex-felons, restoring rights upon release. Something to be aware of if it affects you or someone you know. Most importantly, make a plan to vote. Whether you vote early by mail or vote early in person or go on election day, put it on your calendar. If you're eligible and registered, your vote is your voice, you guys. It's how you influence who leads our state and what policies they're going to pursue. And here's my encouragement to every single voter. I don't care what side of the political coin you support. The 2026 Minnesota governor's race is shaping up to be one of the most fascinating and perhaps continuous in the country. You've read a lot here about me speaking on Mike Lindell's background, his strengths and weaknesses, and how he compares to others, but in the end, you, the voter, gets to decide what factors matter most to you in your voting decision. Is it his business track record, or his defiance of democratic norms, his outsider energy, or his lack of government experience? Do his ideas for Minnesota's future align with yours, or do you prefer what his opponents are offering? I encourage every voter to think critically and holistically. Seek out information from multiple trusted sources. If a claim sounds wild, and there has been many wild claims in our politics lately, check it against factual reporting. Reach out to campaigns if you have specific questions about their platforms. Good candidates will have positions on taxes, education, healthcare, public safety, and more. Don't let any single ad or headline make your mind up for you. Minnesota has a rich civic culture here. Use it. Attend a town hall meeting or watch a debate once the campaign heats up. Finally, when the time comes, cast your vote confidently, knowing you've done your homework. Minnesota's laws make voting convenient, and its tradition of high turnout is something to be proud of here in Minnesota. No matter which candidate you support, participating in the process is crucial. Elections are our opportunity to hold leaders accountable and set a direction for our communities and our state. So whether you're a diehard Lindell fan, a skeptic, or somewhere in between, make sure your voice is heard throughout your ballot. If you want to look at an actual example of what a candidate should have on their stances for their campaign, you can go to Run for Something, look up my name, Ashley Hayes, for the governor race of Minnesota. I just have my examples up there. I'm not actually running. I did not get everything done in time and could not get my residency verified in time, unfortunately. I'm so sorry. I was in the process of moving all of last year, like hours and hours away from where I was living. But I have those type of policies on there so you can take a look at what I'm about, but also what you need to be looking for. It's an example of what you should be looking for on these candidates that are running, you guys. And I'm hoping that by giving my personal example out there of my own run for something, that you guys can do more informed research, and when you're reaching out and talking to the campaigns and to asking your questions, you know which ones to ask.